Now that you're familiar with the various formats, let's discuss the steps to creating effective job aids. I am on page 12. Now, job aids derive from your front-end work that you should complete before you design any course content. But typically there are 5 steps that are required to create a job aid. The first is to clarify the job aid topic. Second is to select the appropriate job aid type. Third is to actually write a draft of the job aid. Fourth is to run usability tests on the job aid. Fifth is to edit the draft job aid into a finalized version. So let's look at each of these steps in more detail. And there's a scenario on page 12 that we're going to use to detail these steps. So Sarah Ridgeland is teaching a class on how to create websites using Dreamweaver. She wants to create a job aid on how to create rollover buttons in order to help students master the following course objectives. Given pictures, software, and a job aid, students will be able to create a rollover button so when users move their mice, rollover effects appear. So to create the job aid, the professor follows these 5 steps. And the first step appears at the bottom of page 12 of the workbook, and that is to clarify the job aid topic. So we know based on this scenario that Sarah is going to create a job aid that focuses on creating rollover buttons. So the second step is to select the appropriate job aid type. Now, since Sarah is moving her students from a starting to an ending point in order to create the rollover buttons, she's going to use a step-by-step format for her job aid. So then she moves on to step 3, which is on page 13 of your workbook. And she's going to write a draft job aid. So first she's going to sit down and type out the steps that are needed to create a rollover button, and ideally she's going to do this in front of the computer as she's creating the job aid because she doesn't want to do it off the top of her head. She's likely to make mistakes that way. Or she may take for granted that students will know certain steps or forget certain steps. So she wants to type out the steps in front of the computer using the software and paying attention to what might confuse students because she might take stuff for granted as a expert user, but for those novices who will be using the job aid, she has to pay attention to sensitive areas. And this includes taking screen captures to create images of what she is doing. For now, go ahead and stop the video and turn to workbook page 14 to review an example of the draft job aid of creating rollover buttons. Also review the subsequent paragraph that follows the example. Once you are done, return back to the video and we will talk about step 4, running usability tests on the job aid. Now you are ready to run usability tests on the job aid, which is step 4. In order to give you an idea of how to run usability tests, I'm going to show you a video that comes from Performance Technology Overview, which is an instructional CD. It's the 2nd edition, and the publisher has given me permission to show this to you.
Usability testing is a process in which a product is examined to determine if it is successful in achieving its objectives. For example, if you create a job aid, then you need to test it to determine if it is effective in terms of clarity of content, visual appeal, ease of navigation, and usefulness of information. You may also elect to test other features of the product as well. Usability tests are often performed throughout the design stages of a project. For example, after a text-based job aid is created, usability tests are completed on one person at a time to gather feedback about the performance of the job aid. Let's examine the guidelines for completing usability testing. The first step is to recruit participants to test the job aid. Next, you want to communicate instructions to the participant. Tell him you are testing the job aid and would like him to use the job aid to complete the task at hand. Tell him during this process you want him to think out loud. For example, if he doesn't understand particular instructions, he should say so. If he would like an illustration to further explain some text, then he should say so as well. Also inform the participant that you will not assist him in answering specific questions about completing the tasks on the job aid. Then let him test the job aid, and as he talks out loud, you should be taking notes to see where the problem areas are within the job aid and where the effective areas are. Remember, if he runs into problems during this process, don't help him. Rather, investigate where the confusion lies within the job aid. And at the end of the testing process, thank the participant for his input. After all the usability tests are completed, you then want to draw conclusions about the data and make changes to the product. In the case of job aids, illustrations may be added in key locations, instructions may be clarified, and additional information may be added. If the designers are still uncertain about particular areas of the product, more usability tests are carried out. For example, you may edit the job aid and run a new batch of usability tests on it to make sure the changes are effective. Once the designers are confident that their product is effective, then they cease with the testing and roll out the final instrument.